Last year, I took an epic road trip from California to the Arctic Ocean with my Storyteller van, and in today's video, I'll share some tips I've learned from that trip. Hi, my name is Peng. I'm a photographer and I'm a travel addict. In late August and early September of 2023, I drove from the California Bay Area all the way to Tuktoyaktuk on the shores of the Arctic Ocean in the Northwest Territory of Canada. Today, I'll share my tips with you in case you're planning a similar trip. My trip took me up the Dempster Highway in Canada. There is a similar highway in Alaska called the Dalton Highway, which I've done twice in the past. Today though, I'll focus on just the Dempster, but some of what I'll cover should also apply if you choose to do the Dalton Highway. I also want to point out that driving to the Arctic Ocean outside of the winter season is not as daunting as it sounds. Both of these roads are regularly maintained highways and people drive on them all the time. Magazines have driven sports cars up the Dalton Highway, and on the Dempster, a lot of locals we met were just driving regular sedans. I met a couple from Maryland in their Honda Civic, and there were also people riding bikes. My point is, my Storyteller van made the trip easy and enjoyable, but you don't need a jacked up overlanding vehicle to make this trip. Of course, without proper planning, you can still get into trouble. That's why I want to share what I know, so you can be better prepared to do this safely, and more importantly, actually enjoy your trip. Finally, these are just my own tips based on my own experience in a van. I've done a lot of overlanding, but I don't claim to be an expert, and I'm always learning new things myself. So use my video as a reference. If you see something I'm doing wrong or know something I don't, comment below so we can all learn. Now let's get started. These are some basic things I always do or carry in my van for any long road trips, so I'll just go through them very quickly. Get your vehicle checked out. Does it need an oil change? Do you need new tires? Do you have a basic toolkit and a first aid kit in your vehicle? Do you have some food and water with you? And if you don't have a van, do you have something to keep yourself warm, like a blanket or a sleeping bag in case you get stuck? Both of these roads are stunning, and you won't regret choosing either one. If you have the time, why not do both? However, for this trip, we only had time for one, and we picked the Dempster Highway. Here's why. One, it actually goes to the Arctic Ocean. The Dempster Highway is a public road that ends at the village of Tuktoyaktuk. You can drive right up to the Arctic Ocean and even camp there for the night. If you're brave enough, you can take a dip in the ocean, just like we did. On the other hand, the Dalton Highway was originally built for the oil field, and the last 8 miles are still on private land owned by the oil company. You can't drive to the ocean. You have to pay for a shuttle bus to reach it. 2. Dempster Highway is a little easier. There are only 2 paved sections on the Dempster, at the very beginning and when you drive through the town of Inuvik. However, the road is compacted, wide, and very well maintained. The traffic you encounter will mostly be private cars and tourists. The Dalton Highway was completely unpaved when I first visited back in '99, but when I was there in 2019, I was surprised to find a huge portion of it paved. However, the paved section was full of potholes, not to mention that most of the traffic on the Dalton Highway consists of commercial trucks. So overall, I personally think that driving the Dempster is a little more tourist friendly. The Dempster Highway is closed twice a year, once during the spring thaw and once during the winter freeze. This is because there are 2 ferry crossings, and the ferry cannot operate during the river thawing and freezing periods. However, for the rest of the year, including winter, the road is open. On a side note, I'm really tempted to try to drive this road at some point in the future. Can you imagine how pretty it must be without that snow? But for now, I just don't feel comfortable doing it in this van until I've gained some hardcore winter experience. If you plan to drive this in the winter, I have no tips for you, but I can tell you that it's a lot more dangerous if you get stuck, so make sure to do thorough research before you go. I've been to Alaska and Canada in late spring when there's still lingering snow on the mountains, or in the summer when there are flowers and mosquitoes. So for this visit, I wanted a different time of the year, and I chose autumn. When you're that far north, fall colors don't come in October, no. They happened in late August and early September, and they changed rapidly. When we drove up the Dempster, the colors were just starting to change, and a few days later when we drove back, they were at their peak, and they were spectacular. Unfortunately, this is nature. There's no way to predict the exact peak color or bloom time. I did my research, made an educated guess, and got lucky. So whatever it is that you want to see, spring bloom, summer glacier calving, or fall colors, do the best research you can. Pick a time and keep your fingers crossed. Our trip lasted 3 weeks, and along the way we visited places in Alaska, Yukon, and British Columbia. But guess where we went first? The Arctic Ocean. The reason? To build some time buffer in our trip in case we get stuck or need to take a detour. Road closures are common on the Dempster, often due to weather. Yes, it can snow even in the summer and the road can close, but closures can happen for other reasons as well. In fact, the road was closed due to an accident while we were at the Arctic Ocean. It was serious enough that the local Mountie was telling us to prepare to hunker down and spend the winter in Inuvik. Yes, you heard that right. They were advising tourists to be prepared to stay for the winter. Even the most optimistic estimate at the time was that it would take 30 days before the road could reopen. I won't go into the whole story here, it's not what this video is about, but I do plan to create a series detailing my entire trip in the future, so subscribe if you want to hear the full story. The bottom line is, we got lucky. The road crew managed to make temporary repairs and reopen the road for a few days to let tourists out before closing it again for full repairs. Thanks to that buffer in our plan, it had minimal impact on our original itinerary and our return home, and we got to see the Arctic Ocean. Make sure that you have good tires and consider airing down. Among all the people I met and chatted with on the Dempster, locals and tourists, 6 vehicles experienced flat tires, with 4 of them having 2 flats each. This includes a local in a pickup truck who fixed 1 flat, drove another kilometer, and then got a 2nd flat. What's the common theme? Well, those who got flats either didn't air down enough or air down at all. Or, in the case of a rental Jeep we met, they did air down, but had cheap tires, so don't cheap out on tires either. As for me, I usually carry only 1 spare because I've never had 2 flats simultaneously. However, for this road, I decided to carry 2 spares, 1 on the rear door and another underneath in the original basket. By the way, Sprinter owners, if you're like me and have non-stock tires that won't fit into the original basket, you can easily mod it with an agile bracket like I did. I'll link that video here. I also carry a tire repair kit and an air compressor. Fortunately, because I have the tried and true BFG KO2 tires, plus I air down my tires by about 25%. For my STO peeps, that's down from 46 to 35 in the front and from 70 to 52 in the back. On top of that, I drove slowly, so that's why I didn't get any flats. Just a quick tip, all the flats we saw occurred north of Eagle Plains, between the Arctic Circle sign and the border of Yukon and the Northwest Territory. I'm not saying you won't get a flat elsewhere on the road, but the crushed shale material in that particular stretch is especially sharp. Carrying a jerry can is theoretically not necessary. The longest stretch on the Dempster between gas stations is, if I remember correctly, around 230 miles from the start of Dempster to Eagle Plains. This distance should be within the range of any normal vehicle. However, I would still recommend carrying a jerry can for emergencies. In my case with the Mercedes Sprinter, I specifically upgraded to the 45-gallon tank for this trip, which has been the best investment. Conservatively, I can get 650 miles out of a tank, and I never had any concerns about running out of fuel. Regardless of your vehicle's range, I suggest topping off whenever you come across a gas station. You never know what may happen. When we got stuck, all supplies were cut off, and the local gas stations were running out of gas. Fortunately, we had a full tank that tied us over. Also, if you have a diesel Sprinter like I do, make sure to bring one of these fuel nozzle adapters. I'll include a link to the one that I have in the description. It can be confusing because there are 2 types of diesel nozzles, a large one for trucks and a small one for cars. If the truck nozzle doesn't fit, you'll need this adapter to refuel. For example, at Eagle Plains, they only have 1 diesel pump and it had the large nozzle. Without this adapter, we wouldn't have been able to refuel. So if you're driving a diesel vehicle, make sure to grab one of these adapters for your trip. As you venture further north on the Dempster, it becomes increasingly difficult to find clean water sources. If you're a van or RV owner, this section is specifically for you. During our trip, except for the night by the Arctic Ocean, we boondocked the entire time. Finding spots to overnight was easy. The challenge was deciding which spot offered the best view. Since we didn't stay at campgrounds, our primary water sources were gas stations and visitor centers. While campgrounds may seem like a good option for water, once we reached Yukon and the Northwest Territory, many campgrounds no longer had potable water. They had signs warning visitors to boil water before use. So before the trip, I considered 3 options for water. One is get an expensive aftermarket filtration system in the van, which I know a lot of people do. I never drink out of the faucet and I didn't want to spend that much money, so that was out for me. 2, fill non-potable water, usually only for showering, and filter my drinking water. Then when I get home, disinfect the tank. I didn't want to do this because it was too complicated. So that's why I settled on my 3rd option, carry clean water. In my van, with conservative use, fresh water can last 3 days for 3 adults, but I do have a siphon feature. On a side note, I'm so glad I have the ability to siphon water into my tank. In fact, no matter which brand I choose for my next van, it must have a siphon feature. I use my van off-grid so much, I consider this feature to be crucial. To supplement my water supply, I got these bottles. They are 6.5 gallon each. When I fill 4 of these, they basically double my water capacity in the van. When the tank in the van is empty, I just siphon the water from here into there. I love these bags, by the way. They're not a sponsor, but I'll put a link down below. They're made in the US, they're super strong. I had these for almost 2 years and I abused them, and only 2 developed small leaks, but they're cheap to replace. And the best part, they're light. When I don't use them, they collapse into nothing. I bought a cheap black Home Depot tote bin. 2 of these fit in the largest bin perfectly, and in case it leaks, water just goes into the bin. For the other 2, they fit in my shower pan, and the same thing, if water leaks, just goes down the drain. So now I have a 6-day supply of water. On the Dempster, we found 2 places to fill up. There is a Territorial Park Visitor Center right after the Peel River crossing before Fort McPherson. However, the water pressure here is very low. When we used our hose to fill, the water couldn't even enter the tank. Thankfully, we had the bags, so we filled them and siphoned the water into the tank. The second place is the Happy Valley Territorial Park Campground in Inuvik. This is city water, so there was enough pressure, and they were nice enough to place the faucet outside the gate. So even though the campground was closed for the season when we arrived, we were still able to fill up. Those are the only 2 places I know of on the Dempster for filling potable water. If you know of another location, please share it in the comments below. I plan to drive this road again in the future, so I don't mind having that information. My van uses Volta, so everything is powered by lithium batteries, including the stove. That's why I brought my camping gas stove in case the electrical system fails. I also brought some cup noodles so I can at least have some simple food. I have my backpacking Sawyer water filter, so if my water pump fails, I can at least go into any river and filter water for drinking. My cell provider is Google Fi. Except for areas around Fort McPherson, Inuvik, and Tuktoyaktuk, I didn't have any cell phone signal. But I think Eagle Plains Hotel did have Wi-Fi, so I made sure I downloaded offline on Google Maps before the trip. I was also relying on my Garmin InReach the whole time to communicate with families and fellow travelers who were trapped just like us. I know the iPhone 13 has satellite messaging capabilities, but from what I've read, it's for emergencies only and not that reliable. InReach is designed to send messages via satellite, just like text messaging. I have an InReach 66i, have been using this for years. You can see how beat up it is. They don't have the best UI design, but I've never had a single problem sending and receiving messages, and that's what counts. So I trust this much more than an iPhone. If you don't do month-long trips in places like Nepal like I do, then the Garmin InReach Mini should work just fine. It's smaller and cheaper. You do need a subscription, but they offer everything from monthly flexible plans to annual contracts, and you can pick and choose whichever plan suits you. There are lots of bears in Canada. We saw so many bears on this trip that I stopped taking photos toward the end. It was mostly black bears in British Columbia, just lurking on the side of the road and eating. The further north you go, the more grizzlies you'll see, and they're bigger and more dangerous. Finally, when you get to Tuktoyaktuk, you might see polar bears, and they're the most dangerous of them all. We saw people carrying bear sprays even for a casual evening walk. Of course, you might also encounter other wildlife like moose. Regardless of the wildlife you come across, remember that they're all wild animals and it's important to keep your distance. Now let's specifically talk about bears. They're intelligent, strong, and have a very good sense of smell. In California's Sierra Nevada, my home turf, bears frequently break into cars and homes, so I've learned to keep food away from me at night in bear lockers and canisters. In the van, we made sure to contain food smells as much as possible. At night, we cleaned up any food outside and around the van. I even repurposed my old bear canister as a trash can so I can seal it. I've heard of a product called Trasharoo where you can hang a trash bag on the back door or the spare tire. It works fine in places like Utah where there isn't much bear activity. I travel in bear country all the time, and hanging a trash bag out back to me is the equivalent of hanging a food basket out for bears. That's why I never even considered buying one. If you own one, please comment below because I'm curious to know if they have a way to seal the smell. If they can't contain the smell, then I would not recommend using one in Canada unless you want a bear to scratch up your back door. As I mentioned earlier, we saw plenty of wildlife just from the road. Slowing down is not only important to avoid hitting wildlife day and night, it will also increase your chance of spotting them. When you're on an unpaved road, it will also take you longer to stop, not to mention if the road is wet, they become extremely slippery. If you see faster traffic behind you, be courteous, pull over when it's safe and let them pass. If you see incoming car, slow down so you don't fling rocks into their windshield. And if you see a commercial truck coming, just pull over and stop, especially on Dalton Highway. We nearly got hit when an incoming semi's air brake failed on Dempster. Had we not stopped and pulled over to wait, we would have been in the direct path of that truck. So just slow down and take your time and enjoy the view. Contrary to popular belief, the Dempster Highway is not as desolate as it may seem. We were there after the high tourist season and we were still seeing 2 to 3 cars every hour. This means that if you find yourself in trouble, someone will likely stop and offer assistance. In return, it's important for you to also stop and help others in need. It's kind of like the rule of the North. So you don't have to worry about dying in the middle of nowhere because you got a flat tire. Canadians are friendly people. It's no different in the Northwest Territory. People were waving at us on the road and they love to chat. We heard so many stories like polar bear stories, fishing stories, village histories. I wish we had more time there, and of course we nearly did spend a lot more time there, but after we got stuck, people really came together to help. These are very small communities and news spread much quicker over cell phones than official government websites. It was our gas station attendant who told us they were temporarily opening the road to let tourists out. She had received a picture of a notice posted at Eagle Plains Hotel from a relative. This information allowed us to seize the opportunity and make our way out. And of course, we paid it forward by stopping 3 times to assist others with their breakdowns. So always remember to look out for each other. Finally, here are a few miscellaneous notes. Wash your car ASAP. The road, when they pave it, I believe they added in sodium chloride to reduce dust. However, once it sticks to your vehicle or if it gets wet, it turns into almost like a cement quality. So I had to wash the van 3 times. Clean your wheels especially well. My wheel was out of balance and shaking because of the mud that got stuck to it. Similar to when you get snow and ice stuck on your wheels in the winter, except this won't melt away. So be sure to scrape the wheels down. Use the mileage post for trip planning. It's a classic guide that gets updated every year, and I personally own 3 copies. They cover everything based on the mileage posts in northwestern Canada and Alaska. It provides information on gas stations, attractions, and even roadside parking, which was important for us as we were boondocking. So it's truly a must-have if you're driving in that area. And it also makes for a great souvenir once you're done. If you decide to rent a car, make sure to go through a specialty rental company. They're a company that specifically caters to Dempster Highway and Dalton Highway, and their cars usually come with tire repair kits and satellite communication devices. Regular rental companies like Avis won't allow you to drive on dirt roads, and the same applies to RV rentals, so check the rental agreement. Some rental vehicles are equipped with GPS these days, so if you break the rule, break your rental contract, it could result in an expensive bill. If you're well prepared, driving the Dempster or Dalton Highway can be one of the most memorable experiences of a lifetime. I know this was a long video, thank you for sticking to the end. I hope my tips proved to be useful for you, and if you did find it useful, please leave a like. If you want to see more videos like this, consider subscribing, and I will see you next time.